Today, Ted and I are going to be talking about one of the richest stories of piano manufacturing, the story of C. Bechstein, a very well-known, great manufacturer, and a very rich history that stems all the way back to 1853. Stick around for an incredible story, and we're going to answer the question, what ever happened to C. Bechstein?
Hi, this is Ted with Alamo Music Center in beautiful downtown San Antonio, Texas.
And I'm Patrick Marr. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channels, check out our other videos, sign up for notifications, like our videos, leave us comments. We really appreciate your support, and we love to interact with you.
The word is prestigious.
Prestigious.
The most prestigious piano company in the world. That's a good title.
Well, I feel like a lot of piano manufacturers aim for that, right? That's kind of the goal, is to not only make a great instrument that sounds beautiful, but also to
snobbery's built in.
Yeah, it's you want to be talked about in the same conversation as the most expensive bottle of wine, or a tuxedo, or a
good cigar,
a nice designer or painter, and it's this is we created this. And so the story, this is part of our Whatever Happened series.
Right, and it comes about because it's the most played piano in the store for the last 3 months, without argument. Why is that? Because it's right behind the cash register.
And
it's the most accessible one.
And it looks kind of scary. It's especially, we're coming up on Halloween here in Texas, but it's kind of a spooky looking
instrument. It has
instrument.
those rounded type legs.
And a spider-webbed music rest.
The spider-webbed desk, and then it has that railing that goes around it. And so it kind of looks like a perfect cast for a Mel Brooks black and white horror movie.
Yeah, so we're of course talking about the C. Bechstein Model B that we have here at the store. And we are highlighting that piano, but also talking about Bechstein as a company and whatever happened to them. They're often talked about in the upper echelon of piano manufacturing, along with the Hamburg Steinways, with Blüthner, with Bosendorfer, and and Bechstein falls on that list. Fazioli falls on that list. Shigeru Kawai falls on. So this upper echelon of pianos, Bechstein is no stranger on that list, and for good reason.
Yeah, I use the word prestige and prestigious manufacturer because these C. Bechstein pianos were literally straight across the board, regardless of what country. This was the royal court piano. I mean, there were the royal court pianos in Russia and all in Denmark and all over
Spain,
Spain, everywhere. If you had a C. Bechstein, there was, not only was it like a snob appeal kind of thing, it literally was the best playing sounding piano.
And so I think we'll rewind to the very beginning, but the year is 1853. Carl Bechstein is aiming to make a piano that can keep up with
Franz Liszt. They wanted one that he could not destroy. Up until that point in time, and I think it was about 5 to 8 years before that, Chickering presented Liszt with a piano that he could not destroy. That's why he liked it. This is finally a piano I could not destroy. So that became the marching orders for anyone that wanted to build the world's dominant, best piano.
And so a high task, of course, but they, I guess Bechstein had been working in France as an apprentice and worked building instruments, but really wanted to make his own product, and had a connection to Liszt, his son-in-law, and who they built the first pianos, and got the approval of both the son-in-law and of Liszt. And it's incredible that it eventually, and it took not even 20 years, but they became this great manufacturer who was pumping out more pianos than anybody else out of Germany. And in 1853 is a special year because not only was Bechstein founded, but so was Steinway and Sons.
Steinway and Sons.
And so was Blüthner. And so these three pianos that are still talked about as, some of the best made manufactured instruments all started in 1853. There must have been something in the water, right?
Right, something in the water, and particularly too, remember that Bosendorfer was making pianos at that time, and now their production was much, much smaller and much more limited in scope because they were primarily focused on Austria.
Yeah, and so Bechstein, they had this very ambitious goal, kind of realized that goal very quickly, and became a very sought after instrument. Queen Victoria,
right,
put her stamp of approval on it, and said, hey, I want this not only here in London, but at our other, at the other palaces around the British Empire. And so they had this thing, the royal warrant, and it was basically, hey, we want this piano, the Bechstein piano, not only for its beautiful art case, the display of it, but because it's a wonderful instrument. And you saw these popping up.
Didn't they put that on the soundboard?
Yeah, and so on the actual crest of Bechstein pianos, they would put the royal court of where you could find a Bechstein piano, and it was so important because that was this is whenever the best pianist would come and entertain royalty, they would be playing a Bechstein.
Now, we've had Bechsteins come through the store from time to time, and I've never really, I play them and I pay attention to that, but now that you mention that, I do recall looking at the plates, and they would always have these cities listed in there, and then they would have a lot of information written on the plate itself. It's part of the cast iron pouring for that plate. And so sometimes their plates were fancier looking, and they make them so when they were painted, they looked a lot, more designed, more decorated.
Yeah, and so out of Berlin, they've started spreading. They had a factory and a performance hall that were built in London, in Paris, in Vienna. And then, there was a boiling point reached in, the early 1900s in Europe. But before that, I guess, C. Bechstein did pass away in the year 1900.
Right.
And his sons took control over the company at that point. I think Edwin was one of them. The other name escapes me, but Edwin will come up later here in the story. But they continued manufacturing, and I think up until 1913, they were the largest manufacturer in Europe, especially for the quality. They were producing somewhere about 4,700 pianos a year.
That's quite a bit.
And they employed a whole bunch of technicians, and just very highly sought after. But then a boiling point was reached in Germany. I think Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, and something else happened at that point. And World War I breaks out. And it's interesting because I think up until 1915, there was still the London shop of Bechstein pianos, and they were still a major influence. I think they were still the most sold piano in London. But in 1915, there was a treaty against basically doing any business with the enemy.
Right.
And so they assumed ownership of all the pianos in the Bechstein Hall there in London.
The war ended, they took everything.
Well, they took everything. It was right there in the middle. They took everything. They assumed ownership of it. They sold the building. They auctioned the building off. They took 137 pianos. And it's interesting because right around that time period is this piano that we have in the store. It's a 1909 if you trace the serial number. And it's just interesting. I mean, this
may have been involved.
Who knows? This piano has seen so much history. This company, Bechstein, has seen so much history, but especially around that kind of sweet point of 1909, height of manufacturing for Bechstein, for the name, for the prestige. And here it is, 100 years later, 111 years later.
That they survived World War I and having all of their assets ceased. Mm-hmm. And then they rebuild, make pianos again, and then World War II hits. And this time, their asset seizure at the end of the World War is around the world, and they take everything again.
Yeah. So there's some rich history between these years, too, between World War I and World War II. They actually invented the first digital grand piano. Electric grand piano.
The first electric piano. And it was a grand piano.
It's called a Neo-Bechstein.
Neo-Bechstein. It was really fascinating because they clustered the string area into groups of about 5, and they made a wide microphone without a membrane on it. Mm-hmm. And they just kind of put it up there underneath where the soundboard would be on a piano.
Because there was no soundboard.
They didn't put a soundboard on this one. So the pedals on that piano, the right pedal, instead of a sustain, controlled the volume, and the left pedal, the damper one, actually controlled a different tone section.
It's like a Celeste is what I was reading about.
It made a different bright, there was like no bottom line, no mids or bass, and it was just like a Celeste.
Yeah, so the right pedal would kind of function as a organ pedal, at the time. But just really interesting that they partnered with, it was another company and it was an electronic company that
Siemens Corporation.
yeah, that had the technology to build underneath piano strings and really invented the electric piano because they're like, okay, it's easier to move around. It was a 4'7", so smaller than any baby grands that were being manufactured at the time. It really kind of opened the door for a new idea.
It had a different hammer mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
It had a regular piano action with hammers, but right where the hammers would hit the string, they had like a tone bar in there, like a mini hammer, so that the hammer hit a hammer that hit the string.
Very bizarre.
I think they had to do that because it had something to do with triggering the electronics to work or something like that. I haven't finished reading up on that before we shot this video.
Yeah, and so at this point, this is kind of the history buff in me. Like I delved into this because I was like, wow, this is incredible. So Edwin, who's Carl Bechstein's son, got in an altercation with his brother. That he split off from the company. He got bought out, and then I think in the 20s, him and his wife actually bought their way back into the company because it was basically on a stock exchange where you could buy into the company. He purchased shares back into his family-named company, and at this point, there's a lot of really interesting history, and it's out there to be read, and it almost feels uncomfortable to talk about on this, but Edwin's wife, after Edwin died, was like a huge Nazi sympathizer, and you could correlate the rise of...
The one that quoted said she wished Hitler was her son.
Yeah, there was some really kind of horrible
Bizarre
things
behavior.
that were said, and introduced because as a manufacturer, because of the prestige of the instrument, she was directly involved in introducing Hitler to a whole bunch of wealthy elite in Germany. This is all pre-World War II. Liked his enthusiasm and
Piano society.
And so it's just like this real. I mean, and that is not the Bechstein of today. That was all seized after World War II. The denazification of the company happened, and they didn't even make pianos, I think, until they took about a 4-year break to kind of rebuild with a different management, basically.
Well, to give you an idea, the 1944 or 45 valuation of their total asset seizure and repayment to the rebuild wartime effort after the war was $2.6 billion at that time. So you can imagine what it would be now.
And so Bechstein, I don't think ever recovered fully from that, and kind of where they are today is very closely tied to. It was a new company after World War II because there was a name that people recognized. It was piano technicians who were in Germany who wanted to start building again, and the company started building back up. But there was a big long break. In the 1960s, Baldwin actually purchased the name, purchased all the controlling shares of Bechstein, and held on to it until about 1986. And around the time of the Berlin Wall coming down and Germany reuniting as a country was when they started really a new era of Bechstein and switched ownership a couple times, but I would say not until about late 90s, early 2000s did they really kind of represent themselves as, hey, we're C. Bechstein, we have these incredible instruments, art cases, we deserve to be on stage with the best names out there. The original history of our company is one of prestige. It's one of, the best concert pianists playing on our instruments. And that's kind of their goal today, is to continue that tradition of making an incredible instrument and being held still in the top echelon of...
Well, in their years when they were had the asset seizure and they were rebuilding, that's when Steinway was really beginning their marketing.
Yeah,
because there wasn't a whole lot of marketing, 100 years. I mean, people were marketing. That's the whole idea of the royal pianos and all that kind of stuff, and these people buy it. And Franz Liszt couldn't destroy one. Well, and he liked it. Well, that's because it didn't fall apart and it played good and it stayed in tune. That really wasn't an endorsement for marketing. It was, at that time, it was proudly stated as a fact. That's how good our stuff is. Because most pianos fell apart after a while. And so that was a really great breakthrough for them when they initially came out, but it didn't have anything to do with marketing. And right after the war, when there's a boost in consumer products, they're trying to get their factory and they have nothing to sell.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Steinway is started producing pianos and marketing, and then Baldwin did the same thing.
And the
after
machine
World
started
War II.
going, especially here in the
it's kind of like
U.S.
they got left off to the side of the piano machine until, like I said, when the Berlin Wall came down is when people really started going back after the Bechstein pianos because they really started to produce decent instruments.
Yeah, so one of the richest history stories I think I've seen in pianos, especially in late 19th century, early 20th century, and very rich history. I think it's a key component to where we are with pianos today, especially with the invention of the electric grand piano.
Oh, sure. And the other thing that I want to stress here is that on the video, I actually do play the Bechstein B that we're talking about, the most played one in the store. And that's because we always go there, hey, how's this go? How's this go? And any songs that anyone's working on, that's the piano we go to. But what's fascinating is that this Bechstein is kind of way above par when you consider it's a 1909 piano, and I don't think there's really been anything significant historically done to this piano to maintain it. But when you sit down and play it, it sounds great. It plays okay. I mean, there's some keys that are a little tighter than others. It does need some TLC. I think what it needs is to have all the keys taken out. I mean, it needs to be remanufactured and rebuilt. But the fact that it's an over 100-year-old piano and it is still presentable, and both not just for appearance, but also for sound and also for the playability. It wouldn't take a whole lot to make it a much better piano. A little bit more, you could make it precisely like it was brand new again. And that's what I think would be great for that piano, but we don't have it priced for that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, and it's one of those kind of just very cool stories, and we really enjoy doing these videos of what happened to these X, Y, and Z brands, and we've been asked to do more. Check out our video on Mason and Hamlin. I think that one was just released a couple of months ago, and we've done it on Kimball and on a couple different brands.
And all of these pianos, it's a real testament to how well the manufacturing process was at the time that they made that piano. And when you consider it's a 1909 piano, and you could, with just a little bit of technician work on, put that thing up there on a concert stage and do a show with that piano.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's got so much historical value, and as a brand and as a piano, just incredible. Pianos are, to us, very living, real things, and it's always cool to kind of look into the snow globe of this is like what, and this is history. This is where was this piano from? Like, what's the story behind it? And it's always a real fun thing to bring that out and tell the story of these instruments. So we hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to check out more of our videos. We will be making more Whatever Happened videos on this series. So thank you for watching. This is Ted Barcelona. I'm Patrick Marr with Alamo Music, and you can find us online at alamomusic.com.